You're listening to the Boston Greeks podcast with Ari and Foti. They've been bringing Greek culture online since 1998, and now they're bringing you the best Greek guests Boston has to offer. So grab your kafedaki and join us.
Hey everyone, welcome to another fantastic episode of the Boston Greeks podcast. I am Ari, and I am here with my co-host Foti Stamos. Hello, Foti.
Yeah, so Ari.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, especially when we have our segments with the Boston Greeks podcast, because it's one of the most exciting things that we do. And what's even more exciting is the wonderful guests that we bring onto the program. In every segment we have, we are so astounded and we're so enthusiastic about each guest. And we're like, we just had the best guest every time we do an episode. But we're always surprised that there's even better guests that we bring onto the program. And today's guest happens to be an example of an amazing person that we got to meet recently, out of the blue, that we learned so much about in such a short time. But we're going to learn more about our guest in this segment. And, we touch upon individuals from so many different backgrounds of our culture. We do, segments on our culture, from music to food, to wine, to business, and to travel. But also, we're going to touch on history as well in this segment.
Excellent. All right. So, Foti, before, we get into too much, let's bring our guest on and let's do this.
Well, let's bring on to our program Cindy Calder. Cindy, thank you so much for joining us on the Boston Greeks podcast. I know that Cindy doesn't sound Greek probably to our guests, but I assure you Cindy is more Greek than Ari and I put together. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you've got a busy schedule. You've got a lot going on. We'd love for you to just pretty much break it down for us about, Cindy Calder and where it all began for you when it came to this passion for being Greek.
When it came to what?
Passion. This
passion.
Yeah, passion is the right word. Okay, so I'll just start by saying I do not have a drop of Greek blood in my body, but I and all the other members of my family often feel that we're more Greek than the Greeks. So my history with Greece started in 1965 when my family moved to Greece. My father was in the core of the government in a group called Foreign Area Specialists, where he was trained in the Greek language, first of all, at the Defense Language Institute in California. And he and my mother both were trained in Greek. And then he was sent to Greece in 1965 during the monarchy, still a monarchy, to learn everything that he possibly could about Greece. And his family were engaged to do the same thing. So we went over there, and he spent his first year, after having learned Greek already, he spent his first year at Pandios in Athens. We lived in Glyfada. I went to school, international school there. And then the second year we lived in Greece, and 66 to 67, we moved to Thessaloniki, where he was sent to the Skoli Polamou as an American. I think, I don't know, there may be other people in your audience, but I believe my father's the only total non-Greek ever to have graduated from both of those institutions. And he has degrees to proudly show it. Unfortunately, he's passed away. So he was, at that stage, he was, I think, maybe a lieutenant colonel in the army, in the American army. And so when he went to Skoli Polamou, it would be like the equivalent, for those of you that don't know, it'd be like the equivalent of West Point. And he became deeply engaged at all levels with the Greek government. His job on the side, in addition to getting these higher degrees, was to learn everything he could about the country, penetrate the tiniest little villages. We had a Jeep, and every weekend we would go in the car down these dirt paths with shepherds and sheep and goats, and it was always Alphodromos.
Cindy, this was
not Alphodromos at all.
This was without GPS.
Forget it. We didn't even have four-wheel drive. We had Jeep, but I don't know that it had four-wheel drive. It was pretty scary. I was very frightened many times. But so and there were floods, disasters, we lived through so much. Then the greatest, disaster, I don't know how you want to define it, but in 67, we were living in Greece at the time of the coup, and my father was in the war college, surrounded by military people. So he continued on in his career, and the government we left Thessaloniki, went back to the States briefly, and then returned to Greece again in the 70s, again in my father's same capacity as a foreign area specialist. And at that point, for the next 8 years throughout the 70s, and I was a teenager. He was posted to the American Embassy, where he was a member of the diplomatic corps. We had diplomatiki, stoma plates and all that. And so during that time, we all, immersed ourselves even deeper in Greek culture. My brothers lived there. I lived there until I went to college. My brothers lived there longer than I did. And so, so that's kind of my Greek background. In addition, I just want to salute my mother, who is a poet and a writer, and sort of got dragged along, not dragged in this case, but taken along with wherever my father was posted. And when she came to Greece, she also became deeply, deeply in love with the country and everything it had to offer. And she went up to the Amerikaniki Georgiki Skoli, where we lived in Thessaloniki, and became the archivist for the school. And then she wrote this amazing book, which I want to show you here. It's called Of I Frontistes tis Gis, Stewards of the Land.
Wow.
It's a very big, thick book about the history of the farm school in Thessaloniki, but also the Balkans. And this was translated. My mom wrote it. My dad helped her, and then they had a professor at the University of Thessaloniki translate it into Greek. She also wrote a novel, which I'll share with you later. But she wrote a novel also set in Greece called The Greek Dream.
That's amazing.
Yeah, all of that's exciting. Then I went to college. After college, I became a banker, and my job as a banker I was hired because I could speak Greek, among other languages at that point. And so I worked for 10 years during the time when OTE, PPC, Olympic Airways, all these Greek companies were going private. And so I worked in some small capacity in helping value the companies and take them to the market.
That's pretty cool.
Okay.
So, you have legitimate Greek credentials.
I do. I tried to pull off a Greek meetings with Greek bankers. That was not so smooth. It's not very capable. But that's really just my first half of my connection with Greek. And it was as a kid, as a teenager, learning slang and, engaging with fun things, drinking at Cena, and, you can imagine the rest. We smoked Marlboros, of course, from the, and then quite late in life, after being a banker for many years and doing some other things, I sort of went back to my Greek roots, if you can call them that. And I decided that I really wanted to learn ancient Greek, and then Latin came later. But I went back to school at a very ripe old age, I won't even admit. And I redid the equivalent of Greek and Latin. I redid the equivalent of a BA. I went to Dartmouth. I had my BA already, but I redid the equivalent of a BA in classics. So I studied Greek and Latin at Columbia. I did not really know any ancient Greek or Latin at that point. And then I continued to get my master's degree at Columbia in Greek and Latin, and reading Herodotus and Thucydides and Plato and those sort of great people in Greek. And then really what I am most proud of is as I was in the process of getting my degree, I decided I really wanted to be a teacher. And so I got a job teaching in New York City in a couple of schools, Greek and Latin, but I also formed my own educational company. So Fotis, when you mentioned all those things that you talk about, wine and food, etc., you didn't say education. You meant, I know you include it, and that's kind of key to it all, but I'm an educator now. So I run a company called Calder Classics, and we take students now from all over the world. It started in New York City, expanded to all the boarding schools on the East Coast, and now really we've penetrated quite deeply into China, where there's a fascination, and we can talk about that in a minute, but fascination with ancient Greece and the language. And so now I run an educational boutique organization where we, among other things, we take students, a lot of scholarship students and others who pay, to Greece, Italy, France, where we read Greek texts or Latin texts, and we integrate our experience with art history, literature, creative writing, whatever interdisciplinary course oratory, rhetoric, whatever I decide to develop, it's all my curriculum, and I hire teachers to do it. And so we celebrate Greek culture, ancient Greek culture, but also in modern day Greece, we always, integrate what we're doing with what's going on around us in the modern world.
Mhm.
So that's it.
Well, that was more than just that's it, because what you just mentioned is extremely fascinating, because just when we got to meet for the first time via phone call, and I was just listening to what you were mentioning, is unless we hear it from someone else, how rich our Greek culture is in ancient Greece and the classics that are being studied, and there's so much interest globally. And us as Greek Americans, I always like to make it a point that we should also participate and acknowledge this part of our history as well.
It's so fun to see the connections. And I just remember when I first started studying ancient Greek, I thought, oh, I'll be ahead of everybody in this class. They were all non-Greek, native Greek speakers and non-Greek speakers. I thought, I'll be so far ahead. And there were words like dendros and, a lot of words that seem the same. But honestly, after about the first half of the first semester, my modern Greek, which is limited anyway, really did not help me. The ancient Greek language is so complicated. The grammar is so intense. It's so difficult that I was at some advantage with some vocabulary, but it's hard.
Cindy, the programs that you're mentioning, as far as when it comes to Greece, is this something that you host throughout the whole year? Is it once a year? How does the program work?
Yeah. So I'm ever expanding. I retired from teaching full time. I created this company while I was also teaching full time in New York City. 2.5 years ago, we sold our house in New York. My husband and I moved to the North Shore of Massachusetts, which is why I'm just getting to know you. And I then decided to go full time. It's kind of like 24/7 when you own your own company. It's like a baby. So 24/7 in developing Calder Classics further. So we are in the process of creating a year-round operation. Now, we do primarily summer programming on the education front, specifically on the programs, primarily summer programs. And I have not announced it yet, but I'm about to announce 2 super exciting. I've told you already, Fotis, that we're going to be going to Monovasia. That's all booked. For an ancient introduction. What's that?
Sold out?
It's my program? No, I've booked.
Booked. Oh, it's booked. Got it.
Where we're staying, and where we're staying.
Yes.
And they've given us a very generous price because we're students, and I bring scholarship students. This summer specifically in Greece, we're going to be there, and then we're going to Samothraki for another program, ancient Greek, and in Samothraki we're going to be studying the Iliad in English. Because I don't know if you know, but Poseidon sat on Samothraki and watched the Trojan War. So that's the idea in the Iliad. So that's during the summer. I run programs a lot in Italy, some in Greece, occasionally in France, with Gaul, in the Gallic area where Caesar was. Then year round, we offer online Greek classes. So right now, for example, I'm running an 8-week every Sunday class online on Zoom on ancient Greek, learning introduction to ancient Greek. And then if we have enough students, we'll do a follow-up second session of more ancient Greek. In addition to that, I host programming. So it depends. Various programs, often fundraising driven, but that's in the background. People basically give what they want, but I'll bring speakers in or do various events related. Like I'm doing a play reading at my house in February, where we're going to read a Shakespearean play that has Greek and Latin references, and we're going to auction the roles, and everybody can pay for their role, and then we'll do a full reading, and that's a fundraiser.
Oh wow, that's so cool. We definitely, at least I'll speak for myself, Ari. I definitely would love to attend some of your in-person events for sure.
Yeah.
And as far as Cindy, you mentioned Calder Classics, but for our audience that are listening to this episode, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions that are running through their mind as far as how can they find out more about Calder Classics and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for asking. Calder Classics is my website. So you just go to Calder Classics. Everything is on there. You can click throughout, but if you're specifically interested in educational travel, if somebody's listening and they have children they want to send to Greece, it's not up yet. This is a big secret, but it's coming. It's going to be in about 2 days because we just confirmed our Greek hotels. So in about 2 days, you will see under educational travel the 2 Greek trips that we're running, the trips to Greece that we're running. We're doing them, just for everybody to know, we're doing them late June to early July, partially because it's hot late and it gets very crowded in Greece and it's difficult to take groups of students around. It's just complicated. So this year we've done it. In the past, we've had programs mostly hosted by the American Farm School in Thessaloniki because they have dormitories and classrooms and it's really convenient and they're a wonderful partner. This year we're not going to be in Thessaloniki. As I said, we're going to Monovasia and Samothraki.
I'm excited about that because from our other episodes, our audience know we talk about, our trips to Greece and obviously my side of the family in Monovasia. One of the most, I think, treasured gems in Greece that most folks have heard about but have not visited yet.
Yes.
So maybe this is another reason why you should visit through Calder Classics.
Yeah.
And do you see, I'm sure you've already answered this, Cindy, but in the groups that you bring over specifically in Greece, do you see a presence of Greek Americans or do you see more Greek Americans attending these programs?
I have I've had one of my, I can't say that, a kid I absolutely adore. I love him. He was my student. He's Greek. I've only had one Greek American that I can think of. He's really Greek, but grew up in America. So I guess that's Greek American. He in 7th grade, he was my student in Latin and I followed him all the way through. He's now a freshman at NYU, but he came with me to Thessaloniki and he was a great help because he speaks Greek and he could take the kids around. But we rarely get Greek kids. Rarely. I mean, it's just, we're not, I'm thrilled to be on this podcast because I would like to spread the word to Greek Americans. And I think that,
of course,
a lot to offer them.
And I should also mention too, Cindy, and for our audience that's listening, we have a fair share of educators who listen to the podcast. And you had mentioned that you have scholarship students. Is that something that you could also learn more about through you as far as who qualifies and so forth?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you. we are an educational organization. We are not a 501c3, but we have formed a charitable, we have piggybacked onto a community fund, which is a common thing to do. So we have a DAF at the community fund. So donors give to us, Calder Classics, through the DAF, to our DAF at the community fund, and then we allocate that money to 501c3s. We can only give scholarships to students who are under the umbrella of an organization. So there's a group in New York, for example, called Prep for Prep. They're our partners. They're a 501c3 educational organization that helps place underprivileged kids in top schools or kids that are all super smart but just don't have the money to go to private schools or on these type of trips. So we partner with them and they help me select the candidates. I do the same thing with another organization that has an arm in Lawrence, so they're local. It's called Squash and Education Alliance. They're kids through an organization that uses squash as a sport to help kids get off the street and do after school activities. So we're closest to their chapter in Lawrence because it's nearby where I live in Essex. Also, the Boston arm of it they're called Squash Busters in where Northeastern is. They have the squash courts in their campus. So with those two organizations, we have partnerships. And those kids come to us, but we can take anybody who comes through a 501c3 because that's how or alternatively, okay, stop there. Alternatively, I have schools that I partner with who have endowments. For example, there's a school I'm working with right now in Tennessee. Somebody endowed a travel scholarship. So that school just pays directly for the tuition for the program. Okay. I've done that with Andover I've worked with before. They have a fund for the same reason.
Well, there's some options there. It seems like, you've got some bases covered. So for those that are listening, I'm sure obviously the more that you just mentioned, they can find out when they get in touch with you as well.
Yes. If you have people if you're associated with an educational foundation that has funding, I would very much like to work with them to bring, bright, young, dedicated students. I should say that this is not easy work, right? I mean, if you're a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid, you might not want to study Greek in the summer. So you really have to be motivated and love it. So that's just, that generally the audience of not generally, always my students are, they have to be sincere and dedicated to learning. But I learned in the first year that I started these programs that it also has to be fun. So the nice combination. And when we go to Greece, hell, you got to have fun. You can't avoid having fun in Greece, right?
Right.
Well, speaking of fun, Cindy, we had the pleasure of having you attend our Greek wine event this past week at the Maliotis Culture Center in Brookline. And we're hoping that there might be some possibilities that we can collaborate on an event together back at the Maliotis.
I have to tell you something really exciting. I called my brother today to tell him that I was doing this. And he told me that my mother spoke at the Maliotis Center many, many, many years ago when she first published this book.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that crazy? My brother lives in outside Boston, so he went. And when I told him I was doing this and that I'd been to Maliotis Center, he said, I know that place. This was 2004. This book was
cool.
published. So she was there in 2004 when it was published.
That's
Isn't
so
crazy?
cool. I'm sure we can pull many, many situations as we get to know more and more people. Our world becomes smaller and smaller.
It's true. It's true. And the Greek world, especially.
In the Greek world, yeah, specifically, right? But wow, this is great, Cindy.
I want to add one more thing.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Which is we have, in a very interesting way, found a lot of Chinese students who are really interested in Greek. And it's very exciting. We've had this flow. It's hard with visas in Italy, but I don't know if it's as hard in Greece. We've had mostly kids coming to Italy from China, and it's a complicated process. But it's not a student visa; it's a tourist visa. But I'm really hoping that we can figure that out, because it's so interesting to have kids come from China who have never been to Greece, often never been to Europe. They speak English very well. They love Greek. I think partially because their education system is so good and geared toward being able to memorize. So the kids that I've had can memorize, and also for many of them, learning French or Spanish as a spoken language is difficult. But with the Greek, you don't have to speak it. You can, study it and read it. So it's just been a very attractive product, or whatever, pursuit for kids from China, which you'd never expect.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
But all things fascinating. And as I mentioned, we definitely, this is not the last time you're going to be on this podcast. We'd love to have you come back again at some point soon, even post programs and enlighten us on what's next with Calder Classics. Okay. We want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us on the program. We're definitely going to have Ari mention all of the information, the notes of the podcast. But thank you so much, Cindy. I look forward to seeing you very soon.
Thank you. Ευχαριστώ. Adiosas.
Hello.
All right. Thank you so much once again, Cindy, for taking the time with us. Thank you, Foti. Thanks, everybody out there, for watching and listening. We're going to have all the information from Cindy in our notes. And her website, calderclassics.com.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So check that out. Check out the links in the notes and visit support, because these are the things that push and promote Greek culture, which is what we love. So thanks, everybody. Thank you, Cindy, once again. Thank you, Foti. Thank you all out there for watching and listening, and we will see you next time.
Yes, sir.
Bye-bye.